Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. I'm your host, Whitney Baker. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Dr. Alexa Martin. Dr. Martin is a board-certified physician, human development expert, and founder of Intuitive MD, which is a whole body medicine practice that helps high-performing individuals break free from cycles of stress, weight struggles, and burnout. Dr. Martin brings her background in preventative medicine and combines it with energy work and performance coaching, and in doing so creates a unique blend of holistic wellness that really helps women address their well-being from all sides. Dr. Martin has helped many clients achieve lasting weight mastery, metabolic health, and mindset shifts using her personalized, science-backed approach. She is a sought-after speaker, writer, and educator, and I'm confident her insights and tools are going to inspire you on your own wellness journey. So let's get into it. Hi, Dr. Martin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Whole body medicine is at the core of your work, and I feel that you've posited that it could be what healthcare might look like in the future. I'm wondering if you could start by telling us your definition and a little bit about the limitations you felt in your previous job as a physician and how you bridged into what you do now.
Yeah. So I define whole body medicine as mind, body, and soul. So I think that when I'm saying whole body, that is what I'm defining, not just our physical bodies. I have a background in family medicine, so I'm a board certified family physician. And so my practice was seeing 20 to 24 patients a day. And a traditional practice usually is about 15 minutes with your patients. If you're doing, a annual exam, maybe a little bit longer. But I was finding that, I was really great at keeping people out of the hospital. I was good at that preventative care stuff, that bread and butter sort of family medicine. But I was always kind of getting stopped, as soon as somebody would ask me, but do you think my blood pressure might be due to stress? Or what about a family issue? I would always want to get deeper into that subject, but I knew I had like 5 people waiting for me in the waiting room. And so when I was designing my own practice and transitioning, I said, how can I create something in which I'm not just addressing the physical things and just giving people medication and maybe going back to a little bit more traditional family medicine. If you think about it, there were GPs for centuries that, are healers in a community, and they knew more about you than just the medical thing, right? So if a mom came in and she was depressed, they knew that, oh, she just delivered. Maybe she doesn't have enough care at home. Who are the community people that can help her? And so it wasn't just going in and looking at symptoms. Usually had somebody in your community that would know all of these little nuances about your life. And so I think a little bit of whole body medicine is going back to that. I had a client the other day that said, thank you, Dr. Martin, because I can talk to you about anything. Our visits are not limited to my elbow hurts. Did you get your mammogram? It's time for your pap smear. It's really about anything you want to talk about. In her case, she was talking about the fact that they've been negotiating getting a new dog. She lost her dog last year, and we had been talking about how to have this conversation with her partner so that they're both on the same page. And so she's giving me an update on that. But when you have an hour with someone, you really can discuss anything. And so that can be talk therapy, that can be personal medicine, and that personalized approach, interacting with family members. How can we be intentional with our relationships? So that's how I define whole body medicine. And leaving my practice was mainly about me. And I thought that there was just a better way of doing it. There's a little bit of burnout because you're giving everything to your patients when you're trying to fit all of that in 15 minutes. I just didn't think it was sustainable for me or for many family practitioners out there.
That makes a lot of sense because, you talked about your definition being mind, body, soul, and I can feel that almost viscerally when you're that woman who has her check-in and you are just getting an exam and you've got 15 minutes. You probably have questions in the back of your mind, and all of a sudden it's done. And I think women especially don't always advocate for themselves. And so they're just like, okay, I'll talk to someone else about it. I'll get to it later. And they kind of fall by the wayside. So I want to explore what I think is perhaps a common scenario for you. If a middle-aged woman came into you and maybe she's getting a physical, but she also talks a little bit about brain fog, low-level anxiety, an inability to release weight, where would you start and how is your approach different now that you're not limited by the traditional restraints you were in the past, now that you have your own practice?
So I have seen many middle-aged women, and these are common symptoms. So you're spot on with the brain fog, the low energy, maybe gaining weight, not being able to take off the weight. Some of the other things I would add that a lot of times women were hesitant to talk to me about is the sexual nature of things. Maybe getting atrophic vaginitis. That is where you get these little tears in the vaginal area. It can make it very uncomfortable to urinate. It can make it uncomfortable to be sexually active. And these were things that I wanted to talk to my women about during my visits when I'd have 15 minutes. But it was that we would always have to reschedule for something for another time to be able to really deep dive. And when you're talking about such sensitive topics, it can be hard to just jump in that in 2 minutes. Like, tell me about this. Let's think about this. And then also come up with a plan, right? Because you can approach this if we're looking at these symptoms as maybe menopausal symptoms or even perimenopausal symptoms, then there's a certain trajectory that we're going to look at. And there's lots of new medication. There's old remedies that can be used in terms of that if somebody's having flashes and stuff. Sometimes I have found that there are little tweaks because there's one thing to say that you're a woman, right? And that there are certain stages of life that happen for women. And then there's another thing to say that we're all individuals experiencing this life in our own body in a specific way. The way that we talk about menopause here in the United States is a completely different topic. If you go to Japan, where women may not say that they have brain fog or they're gaining weight, there is a transition that has a little bit more joy to it because you're letting go of some of those societal bounds that are happening. So I can give you some examples. I've had one woman that came to see me and she wasn't quite menopausal yet. She was perimenopausal and she was having the brain fog issue and was having an issue with losing weight. And so the first thing we did is, I have a pretty intensive intake form with lots of questions. So I want to know about you. I want to know what you're taking. I want to know where you are. So anytime we're starting anything, we got to know where you are in the process. And so for her, her main concerns was that she was having a little bit of prolapse, she was constipated, and she had some brain fog. And she was not able to take off the weight like she used to in her 20s. So, knowing where she is now, the biggest thing I find is that you're usually not doing the things you were doing in your 20s. So, when she was in her 20s, she'd run every day. She'd run 3 to 4 miles. She was newly married. And so she didn't have her children yet. And so, when we talked about let's look at what life looked like then when you're comparing yourself to what's happening now, there are so many different changes. And so I have a different sort of idea about aging. I think aging happens when we lose resources and we lose the resources to repair and renew. And in her case, she was burning the candle at both ends. As an executive woman, she was working. She now had 2 children and she was getting sometimes only 5 hours of sleep at night. And so when she's talking about brain fog, you've collected a huge sleep debt. And so if you think about your 25-year-old self, maybe you could do that for a couple of months, but over time, even a 25-year-old is going to have some cognitive issues. It's the reason when I'm in training, they've put some work limitations now because you don't want your doctor going on their 36-hour with no sleep. You know that there's going to be some cognitive things. And so there's a lot of that happening, I think, with some middle-aged women that their lives look completely different than when they were younger. They're doing more on less. So now you're not sleeping as much. And so we talked about, getting a B complex in there for her just to kind of get her mind back to where she needed it to be. We got some magnesium involved. So she was taking magnesium, but she wasn't taking the right dose to get the benefits. She started to have some blood pressure issues. And so we got her on a triple formula that helped with the blood pressure, helped her sleep at night. She said she got some of the best sleep that she's ever had in the last couple of weeks. And she was feeling more refreshed. And those started working against the brain. So all the things that she was kind of attributing to menopause wasn't necessarily so. In terms of weight, we started doing a protein first approach. She wasn't eating very much during the day. So I said, if you're going to eat a small meal or if you're not really that hungry, if you have protein on your plate along with carbs and veggies or fruits, start with the protein so that even if you have to get up to go somewhere else and you don't finish what you're eating, at least you got the proteins, those building blocks that you need to create muscle and that is not going to leave you feeling fatigued, having that insulin resistance. And so for her, these were the things that kind of turned that around. And see, that's an individual approach. Now, I've had other women that don't have the brain fog, but maybe they're just having the weight gain. And again, we talk about it from a place of, are you doing the things that you would need to do at this point to get to where you need to be? And a lot of times when we're challenged in that way, we aren't. And so, anyone listening, if they really want to do kind of like this mindset shift, I challenge you to think about what your 25-year-old self would do. So, if you start an exercise regimen, I've had women start doing like cross training or something like that and you wake up the next day and you're sore from top to bottom. If you were your 25-year-old self, you would probably not attribute that to aging or menopause or a middle age. You would say, I'm out of shape. I haven't worked out for a while. And so that little mindset shift is going to be so big because it takes this narrative out of that, oh, there's something broken in me. You're saying, no, I just have not built that muscle of consistency anymore. When what's going to work best for me? And that's why I say the first part of any sort of challenge is knowing where are you in the process? Are you somebody who's been running marathons for years? And so now this shift might be a signal that there's something else going on with your body. Or are you somebody who has been pretty sedentary, has the invisible load of taking on everything in your household? Are you taking care of your parents now along with children? All of these things factor in. Do you feel like you still have impact and purpose in your life? I was working with somebody when she came to see me, she didn't feel like she had any more purpose. She was like, I'm finishing out my career, and she felt like her best chapters were behind her. We did a check-in. I started working with her a couple of months ago, and now she's so busy, she only has Fridays for me because now she's starting a business and, she's doing all of these things that she didn't think she could do. And for her, it was really about purpose and impact and like, who am I now that I'm not doing the career that I've always done? Do I have any value or use? And so I take a personalized approach. We have to figure out where you are. Where are you in your readiness to change? What sort of things about your own life, being that very curious observer of yourself, meaning, what are the things in my life that would make things better? What about my days now would add value? And then building that toolbox for the person that you want to become and investing in yourself. And so that's kind of my 5 steps to any sort of sustainable change. And that's kind of my approach when I see a patient or a client.
Yeah, just given those client examples that I think are helpful, because I know women are going to see themselves in many of those examples. I love that you integrate mindset transformation and energy work with traditional medicine. And based on what you just said, I know everybody is bio-individual and has their own individual life circumstances. But what is often the biggest missing link for your patients on their wellness journey? Or is there a couple things that come to mind?
Yeah, I think for especially people who've been in careers for a long time, 30 plus years, and people that I've worked with who are, Gen X boomers, even some older millennials, the first one is purpose. What am I doing? It's usually that they've fallen into their lives, that we're not really taught to design our lives in a certain way. And I know personally, I can say that for myself. I was a good student. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. And so there's this trajectory that you kind of follow. And I was winning on paper. I had a great job. I was a partner at the clinic that I was working in. I hit all of my metrics. I was the top physician. I had a low no-show rate. And so by all intents and purposes, I should have been happy. I should have been through the moon. And I wasn't. I was coming home and I was laying on the couch and I was gaining weight and I wasn't happy. And I would look out the window at 11 a.m. during my busy clinic and say, I wish I could take a walk. The sun is out. It's a beautiful day. And I'm in the clinic from 7:30, sometimes to 5 and 6. And in the Midwest, in the fall, it gets dark. So there would be times where I was coming into the clinic, it was dark, and I was leaving and it was dark. And I said, is this the way that I want to practice medicine? And so that was about me getting really intentional about what I want. And so I would say part of the biggest thing is purpose and intentionality. Boundaries is another big one, especially with my women. I have found that a lot of times we have this mindset of if everyone else could get on board, if all of these other things in my life were set in this way. So I frequently have my moms and my wives, and I call them the managers of everyone, who would say, well, if my husband would get in line, or, my sister, I have family members that, are making things difficult. I always have to be the person. And I would say, who elected you, the person, to do all of these things? And, they usually can't tell me who selected them because no one has, right? We've usually taken that on ourselves. And as the oldest of five, I completely understand that I am the go-to person for everyone. And so learning that one of the bigger things is that we can't change the people around us. We can change ourselves. And I'm somebody who believes that we can change our reality through mindset and our belief systems. And so I always challenge people when they're skeptical of, no, 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 no. It's really that we're always arguing because he doesn't want me to do this or she doesn't want me. I always challenge them that there's a reality in which this person rises to the occasion. And so if you focus on yourself and change your vibration, change the way that you're reacting, you will start seeing that change around you. So I think that is one of the things that I think is really powerful. And I see that a lot with my women, that they're saying, oh, I thought I had to change everyone. And now that I'm focusing on myself, now that my boundaries are firmer, I'm seeing the changes around everyone else. And I saw that too. When I was on my healthcare journey, I didn't tell my sister, you need to get in shape, and my dad, you need to get in shape, but they saw what I was doing. My dad, who's also a physician, was curious about the energy work. And I said, well, are you interested? I will do energy work on you anytime I see you. And he was open, and he's a very serious guy. And, my family was open to it. And so now they've become healthier. They have lost weight. They're walking, they're exercising. But it wasn't because I came to them and said, you need to change. So I would say the bigger themes are boundaries, purpose, change, not trying to change other people. And what does it mean for you to live in intentionality? And when I've worked with couples, do you share the same vision for your lives? A lot of times find our person because we were so in love, right? And this person just lit us up. But we talk about whether or not when 10, 20, 30 years from now, do they want to just live? I've had couples where one just wants to have a very simple life. And, I want to be able to take my children to school, and I want to have enough to take care of them and, sit at home, watch movies. And then I have a completely different vision from the other person. They want to be a millionaire, they want to travel, they want this big house, they want to have multiple businesses. And so the question then is, do you share this value? Did you guys talk about this? And so this is something that when I talk with younger people, we talk about intentionality. You can want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a business person. What does that day look like? And on your ideal day, what does that look like? What do you ideally see yourself doing in the future? So if somebody wants to lose weight and they could never see themselves running, I'm not going to put them on a say, you need to start going to the gym 5 days a week, getting on the treadmill. Let's figure out, what do you see yourself doing in the future? Your future self, magic wand. If you see yourself riding bikes on the coast, then let's get you on a bike. And if you've never been on a bike, then we've got to figure out, how are we going to get you from sitting on the couch to the bike? And that's about intentionality. That is how you personalize an approach. And when we go back to saying, this is the change for medicine, I think there's room for you having your primary care doctor that maybe does all of your preventative care, but then you have somebody that's kind of even a little bit higher, looking at the whole picture. So you can have all of these check marks, just like any other specialist, but then also looking at, what is your purpose, intention? What are the behaviors that you want to have? What are the rituals you want to do in the morning? How do we design your life so that you can be your ideal self in your ideal body?
I love all of this reflection. And I totally agree with you. Another thing that's coming up for me is I think a lot of women, if they're able to get still or have someone as lovely as you invite them into this reflection, they can see and have a sense of what it would look like to be in their highest self. Like, what a great day. Like those little pictures, I trust, like you said, if you see yourself biking by the beach, I think that one of the differences that's coming up for me is if a woman was talking to their physician for like 15 minutes and they're like, yeah, you got to get moving. It's almost like decision overwhelm. And it doesn't leave them with like those small day to day, just like easy to integrate steps that start to bridge them towards that vision for their future self that they have in their heart. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that. And I was guilty of that, right? During that 15 minutes, I would say, yeah, you got to start getting moving, but in which way? And I would be looking at the clock, or somebody would come knock on my door, Dr. Martin, we need something else. And so I too was guilty of saying, let's start moving. Let's get in the fruits and vegetables. Let's make these little changes, and giving somebody like a little checklist, and then saying, next, I'll see you in a couple of months and see how that goes. And so that was a lot of the motivation for me to kind of move away from that. And I do think it is difficult. And so I don't know if I told you that I'm writing a book with these methods, these 5 tips for essential tips for sustainable change, so that anyone can do this. When you're looking at a process, and, I can repeat them again, anyone could take something that they want to start making a change now and say, first, where am I? And be really honest with yourself. Because yes, everybody knows what their ideal life looks like. Well, most people do. I do have some people that have a challenge even imagining that, because they're such people pleasers or overgivers. And, I'm a recovering overgiver as well. And so it's easy for me to think about other people myself. So, you really want to get honest with yourself. If you're somebody who's making resolutions every year, look back at those lists and say, what is this something that I'm putting down year after year after year that I want to change? And if you're not sure, ask the people around you, ask your partner, ask your best friend, ask your sister. They know, because it's something you probably have talked about pretty consistently. So once you know what that thing is, find out where you are in it. Look at from 1 to 5. 1 being, it's not really a problem, and 5 being, I am burnt out. This is an emergency sort of situation. So be really honest with yourself. And when you're talking to your higher self, you close your eyes, your higher self will tell you where you are on that scale. You'll always get a number. And then the next step is, what is your readiness for change? And that's about mindset. Be really honest with yourself. If you're putting it on your list every year that you really want to change this, are you really ready for the changes that will happen? I always warn people when they work with me, especially if we're doing a 90-day transformation, anything that's not firmly planted to the ground is going to dust up. And that could be good and bad things, right? And so you always want to be ready, that when you tell the universe, I'm ready for bigger, better, more magical, that your life is going to change. And so are you ready for that? And when I work with people, I want to know too, whether or not you're quitting smoking or drinking, or if you just want to lose weight, how ready are you to change? And being really honest with yourself. And if you're somewhere in the 1s or 2s, maybe that's not the right goal, and you're setting yourself up for failures to say later on that, oh, I didn't make this goal again. I would challenge you to say you're not ready for that goal. And so that may be not the one to do until you're really in a 3 or 4 with readiness for change. And then that's when you start observing yourself. I had a client that wanted to start working out, and she got one of these online programs from a coach. And we had a conversation about it. And I said, have online programs worked for you? Now she goes, no, I've got Beachbody, I've got all these things, sitting in my home. And I said, okay, and I really had to challenge her, like, maybe you need to get your money back from this, because if online coaching hasn't worked for you in the past, and this wasn't going to be a day to day thing, she was going to have to do these exercises on her own. I said, I don't want you to be set up 4 months from now saying, I'm a failure or I didn't have the willpower. This is about knowing yourself. And that's why you got to get really curious about yourself. And when she lost a little bit of money, canceling the program, but then she found a personal trainer that lived by her and could accommodate her schedule, could work out with her early in the morning or late in the afternoon or fit around her children's schedule. And now she's consistently doing it. She's boxing, she's doing the personal training. So it wasn't about her not having the willpower. This was really about knowing herself, right? And so that's the third thing. Once you've come up with the goal, you know you're ready, really understand yourself. If personal training hasn't worked for you in the past, why not? What was it about it? For some people, it's like it may have been the type of personal training that really didn't appeal to them. It's like a therapist, right? Not all therapists have the same sort of program, and sometimes it doesn't match up. There's nothing wrong with you if that's the case. It's just not the right person or program for you. And so I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, not knowing themselves. If you know that you're going to get a slump at 3 p.m. every day, don't schedule your important meetings there. And then once you know that, you start building your toolbox. Do I need a coach? Do I need a trainer? Do I need a physician that does more than just what my primary care doctor does? And you start building the things that you need around you, but then you're really going to have to invest in yourself. And whether that's, finding a partner to work out with you, or investing in a book that's going to walk you through, or a mastermind, or finding your tribe. And so one of the things that I'm doing is, like I said, I'm writing this book so that I can make this process accessible to anyone who wants to make a change in their life.
Yes. Well, that's great. And I will look for your book and look for it. And I love that everybody will be able to dive deep on those in their own time. I want to make sure as we come up on time, I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the conversation about longevity and aging well. And I'm curious, when you see women, are there key indicators that someone's current lifestyle might be accelerating their aging? And are there kind of simple changes that you feel like nobody is going to say, I wish I didn't do that in their 80s?
Yeah. So I would say if there's the biggest thing that I think ages somebody, it would be stress. And I would say that that is the one thing that you really want to evaluate in your life. As a physician, as somebody who's worked in the ER and has admitted people to the hospital and the clinic, a lot of the things that end people's lives, you can trace it back to stress. And you're usually not surprised when somebody comes in and their blood pressure is high or they've had a stroke. I've had plenty of conversations with women, and I would challenge them, if you disappeared today, your children would find someone to babysit their kids. Somebody would find someone else to do this activity you think that's only on you. People would figure it out. And so why don't we start living in a way in which you can start dialing back the stress without this? But if I'm not doing it, who's going to do it? If you disappeared, they would find a way. If you're in the hospital, if you've had a stroke, if you had a heart attack, if you had a sudden death occurrence today, everybody would be sad, but they would figure out how to get these things done. People think it's a selfish thing to really invest in themselves in this way. And we're never going to live a stress free life. I'm talking about stress light life. I love to give this example. So let's look at somebody like Warren Buffett. He's about to turn 95 years old this year. He is somebody who drinks multiple Cokes. a day. I think he's notorious for having a McDonald's breakfast every morning, loves fast food, doesn't have a diet that would say that somebody should live to 95, right? But he enjoys what he does. Gets up in the morning, he's reading the Financial Times. He, has purpose. And so I tell people it's not as simple as just eating healthy foods, exercising 5 times a day. Because I've had marathon runners who have dropped dead from heart attacks or have gotten cancers. I see women that there's a reason why women have more autoimmune diseases than men, right? Because we take on the burden, we take on all the invisible loads of society or families, and there's a cost to that. And so I want women to give from their overflow. So once you give in to yourself and you have extra, you give from your extra. You don't give to your reserves are gone. And the people who can do that and the people who have mastered that, they master longevity and aging. When we look at the blue zones, we've always tried to copy their diets. We forget to look at the bigger picture, community, purpose. How are they living their lives in a way that they're really embracing the connectedness of everything? I would say those are the things that are adding to the longevity and taking away from the aging. And we know stress depletes your reserves. And so if we're talking about biology, someone who's stressed out, they're going to deplete the reserves faster. And if you don't have the reserves, you cannot do the renewal and repair that your body needs. You'll lose your hair, your stomach will hurt. Your body is good at getting rid of bad cells, cells that are multiplying the way they're not. It can't do that if it doesn't have the extra resources. And so stress is the one that I would address and say, get the stress out of your life. A little bit of stress is good because it helps us grow, keeps us motivated, but a lot of stress, I would bet against somebody who has a lot of stress for living long. And probably you're going to see the age on their skin, their hair. And I can see a stressed out person. If we're talking about intimate areas, I can see it there. So, when you're stressed
Mhm.
out, you lose resources from your hair, skin, your gut, and your vagina. So if you're having weird discharge, if you're having issues down there as well, I usually will say, how stressed are you? And it's usually, if I say from 1 to 10, they're saying 12, right? And so I'm never shocked when I see some of these things. If I see someone who's aging really aggressively, stress is usually the component.
Yeah, for some reason, it reminds me of seeing presidents like on day one and then at the end of the 4 years, and you can see that aging process and stress on their face. So I'm so glad you brought this up. Stress is something that's fascinated, and I've mentioned this many times. I feel like we're so aligned with the mind, body, soul approach to wellness, and so many women overlook stress. This is just a beautiful place to wrap. I know that a lot of your clients are high achieving women who maybe they are in the thick of burnout or have experienced burnout. Just to end on a hopeful note, can we reverse the impacts of long term stress through lifestyle change over time?
We can. So, wow, you just made me kind of vibrate. I love this. I love ending on this because one of the things I really want people to know is it's never too late. I really encourage this idea of being empowered to your health and having health with hope. So, as long as you have breath, every day is an opportunity to turn things around. And I don't believe that things are too late. I've worked with people in their 70s and 80s who thought that their best years were behind them and got them in shape, reverse disease. And so, no, if I could end on one thing, I would say that no, it's never, never, never too late. And if you've been burned out, here's the thing, fail fast, right? When I was experiencing burnout, I didn't say, let me go back for another 10 years of burnout. I said, what can we do now to start changing things? And that is the key, right? These are signals for change. And I tell people, if you don't feel right in your body, I don't care if 100 people are telling you you're winning, it means something is wrong. If you're in great physical shape, but you feel a lack of purpose or hope, it's a signal for change. And it's never too late. You could find someone today and say, I want to change and start making little changes. But I think first it's that mindset. You got to eliminate this idea that it's too late. It's never too late.
I always end my episodes with an opportunity for reflection. So, in this area of aging well and calling in our highest well being with mind, body, and spirit in mind, what's one question women could be asking themselves more?
What would make this better? This moment, this time, this situation?
That's a beautiful place to end. Dr. Martin, I know people are going to want to find you, follow you, and eventually buy your book. So tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, you can jump on my link tree. So it's linktree/intuitive MD. Or you can always email me at info@intuitivemdhealth.com. But all of my handles for Instagram, LinkedIn are on that. And if you want to join my newsletter, my weekly newsletter, you can connect with me there. But I love hearing about people's wins. And so anyone who gets my newsletters knows you can always reply to that. And I want to hear about all the good things that are happening. So I'm easy to reach, I'm easy to connect with, and I love hearing people's stories. I also always offer 15 minutes with me complimentary. So anyone can jump on my schedule and ask a question. If you have a comment, if you want a starting place, that's the way to do it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. This was great. I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.